All right, welcome back, everybody. This week we start our offseason in review where we are going to be looking at the AFC North first. All right, Drew, this is a division that's tough. Obviously, ever since I've been watching football, it's been Ravens and Steelers going head to head. Bengals and Browns have been all right. Browns have been only good lately. Bengals have been good, and then they went back down. Now they got Burrow, they got Baker, and the Browns still just keep getting better and better. And this is a tough division. Raiders face all of them this season, which I'm excited for because these are tough teams and there's going to be great games. All right, Drew, starting with the Browns, how do you view their offseason?
I actually loved this offseason for the Browns, and I feel like that's not something that I have probably ever said, but they were able to identify the biggest weakness far and away on this team, which was their secondary, being able to add in a couple free agents like Mike Hilton, Troy Hill, the big one being John Johnson, bringing that safety over from the Rams, who's a a caller and a leader on that defense. And then being able to bring in a couple pass rushers too, like Malik Jackson, most notably Jadeveon Clowney. They really did kind of a 180 with that defense of what they were trying to do. Lost some, big run stoppers up front. But I think with the way that the NFL is evolving, I think their defense is, effectively brand new, like 9 new starters. Like it's going to be a very different defense. It's going to take them time to really get better. I think when you look at them in September, they're going to be a lot better in like November and December, right? So I'm actually really interested to see how that defense progresses and grows as a unit. But even looking at their draft class too, being able to bring in a Wosu Koromoa from Notre Dame, being able to bring in Greg Newsome, the second great pick at the end of the first round there, defensive back. Really loved what they were able to do. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. They have weapons at every single skill position, including tight end, including multiple running backs, right? And Kevin Stefanski really showed how this offense can work and be super successful outside of a couple games. Baker played pretty well this year. And if they can keep his passing attempts down below 24 attempts a game, you don't want Baker throwing 48 times. But if they can be a run first team and then have Baker go off to play action, this team can be very, very, very good. Some people have them as Super Bowl favorites. I still think that they're a year or two away. I think Baker can win a Super Bowl, but he's not going to be the guy that takes you there, right? I will say, I think the rest of this offense and this defense is so good that maybe they can carry Baker there. But he's not going to be he's not going to be the Andrew Luck dragging a team of scrubs into a conference championship game, right? So overall, really loved what they did. I think they are a better team than what they were last year, 11-5, which was only good for third in the AFC North last year. We are going to be adding an additional game. Vegas actually has them worse, though, which is a little bit surprising to me. Vegas normally has, or most books have had them about either 9.5 or 10 wins. I think there's a legitimate shot that they could have, 11 or 12, but it is going to be a tough schedule. It's going to be a very intense division. I think you could make the argument that all the teams in the division improved. So it's going to be, a very, very competitive time for the Cleveland Browns this year.
I mostly agree with everything you said, right? I like what they did in the draft, mainly the fact that they got Newsome for that back end while they lost a lot of different pieces, and they also brought in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, 2 players I would have been happy if the Raiders landed with, so I really do like these players, and the fact that Newsome would drop to them is awesome. Love what they did. They lost some big players, but they added them back in free agency in the draft. So I think this team is going to be better. I think I'm a little more hot on them than other people, especially within this division. My only thing is the thing with Odell Beckham Jr. Statistically, Baker and the team got better without Beckham. So I wonder if that's going to be the hindrance for them. I wonder if we even see Odell on the team come September. I don't think that's likely, but it wouldn't surprise me if another team was like, hey, well, we want a receiver, and the Browns are open to it.
Wait, you don't think
I don't know. What was it? I don't think
it's likely that he is traded.
I would say it's more likely that he's on the team, but it wouldn't surprise me if they traded him. Like I think it's like a 51-49 split. It
Yeah.
wouldn't surprise me if that's how. Internally, I think they're fine with him, but if a team comes knocking, I think they'll be happy to. They wouldn't hate it because they did find success without him too. Technically, they were a little better without Odell there. So it's one of those things that's the only thing I have about the Browns. I'm like, which is
Yeah.
I don't know. Which is hey, that's a different thing we've been talking about for the Browns in a while.
Well, and that's one of the big issues I have is just I think that it wasn't just statistically. The whole offense looked significantly better without Odell Beckham there. It's a a heavy offense. You have Jarvis Landry, who wants to catch 150 balls a season. You also have Austin Hooper. You have all these mouths that you have to feed. And I think that Baker clearly forced the ball to OBJ a couple times. And when he's just throwing to the open target, I think it was the same thing with Dak and Dez, right? Dak was a much better quarterback when Dez was off the field because he wasn't trying to force anything to him.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I think though, because of his injury history, I don't think he's going to be traded before the season starts. I think maybe he could show some value and get moved at the middle of the season. But if Cleveland has a good record at that part of the trade deadline, week 8, week 9, like would they move off of him at that time? I think that I'm not sure if Odell Beckham Jr. ever really wanted to be in Cleveland. It was reported that he really wanted to be a Patriot before that move happened there. So
that tells me everything.
I think
that tells me everything about the player. It's like, all right, whatever. Like you're happy he could play, but he's just one of those guys that's just you're not going to build around him. You're not going to because he's probably going to want to leave at some point soon. To chase.
Well, my biggest thing is I don't want to build around somebody that has that big of an injury history. Like I don't care how good of a receiver you are. If you can only play 4 games a season, like so what? Like you have to be able to stay on the field, and he can't do that.
All right, moving on to our next team in the AFC North. We got the Cincinnati Bengals, who Drew. They were 4th in the division. They did exactly what we said we didn't want them to do, which was, hey, protect Burrow. Don't let him get hurt. And then he goes down with an injury because they didn't protect him. But he seems back. He's been rehabbing. He looks good, apparently. All signs point to him returning to form. And this offseason, they did a lot to help him. Drew, what do you see? What do you view in this offseason for the Bengals?
Yeah, overall, I really do like what the Bengals did. I thought that they were able to fill a lot of holes. I would have, like you said, Kyle, I still would have started Burrow last year, but I wanted to put him in so many, like 5 or 7 step drop back passes. I would have had the ball getting out of there, 2 seconds or less, do a lot of play action, run the ball effectively. Look, you only won 4 games and you tied a game with Philadelphia that you probably should have lost anyways, right? Like you weren't going to win the Super Bowl this year. So why not just protect Burrow as much as possible? And you don't put him into a situation where he's on pace to be sacked more than any quarterback in NFL history since David Carr, right? Like quarterbacks cannot just lose their, ability to start if they get hurt, but their confidence can be shaken. They can get happy feet. Like all those things are like very, very real, right?
We've seen it happen endlessly before. It happens all the time. So it's nothing new.
Yeah. So like looking specifically at their draft, right? Like I would have gone, with an offensive lineman in the first round. They end up going with Burrow's former teammate, the receiver, Jamar Chase. And they're still able to get, Jackson Carman in the second round, solid, offensive tackle prospect there. They brought in Riley Reif from Minnesota. He's a very good offensive tackle too. You did lose a lot of key players, which is interesting and as you mentioned this at the top, Kyle, like the Bengals have been like one of those teams that has, doesn't have a lot of roster changes throughout the years. And they're also a team that tends to not move around at the draft like at all. But guys like Giovanni Bernard, Geno Atkins, AJ Green, Carl Lawson, John Ross, they're finally, leaving. And it feels like, AJ Green and Geno Atkins, especially, it feels like they've been there for, like 2 decades, right?
Yeah, it really has.
These like a life for Bengals. So I actually like that though, from, a culture standpoint and saying look, we're starting over. I was not impressed with Zach Taylor as a head coach. I'm hoping that they can turn this ship around. I do think that the Bengals, along with the Jacksonville Jaguars, are the two worst run franchises when you look from top to bottom. When you look at not just player personnel, but when you look at the support that the front office and the ownership gives the players, when you look at facilities, when you look at the hotels that they're staying at and the travel accommodations, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a big difference between playing for the New York Giants and playing for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I do like that they improved their offensive line. Their defense is probably going to be terrible. Like that's one of the big things, like their pass defense, especially their offensive line, although they improved it, I'm still
We'll
some questions, but they're, offensive lineup here. You're going to have Burrow, you're going to have Mixon, you're going to have T Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Jamar Chase. You have weapons. That's the one thing that Cincinnati has done a very good job of, is they have surrounded Joe Burrow with insane talent. So they're giving him every chance to succeed if that offensive line can hold up and protect him. And I think that's a big if. Right now, Vegas is projecting them as the over-under at about 6.5. I think that's probably fair, especially given that we're adding a week 17 to the schedule. I don't think anybody thinks that they're not going to be in last place in the AFC North. But I'm most excited. This team is exciting to me because of Joe Burrow, and that's all I kind of care about, right? Like, for instance, Trevor Lawrence makes Jacksonville watchable to me. Jacksonville was not watchable last year, right?
Yeah,
all of a sudden now Jacksonville's like must-watch TV. It's the same thing with Baker in Cleveland, right? So I love the fact that Burrow's here, because it gives me a reason to watch Bengals games. And hey, they were at least entertaining when Burrow was on the field.
I think we talked about it almost every week, at least saying, "Hey, he passes the eye test still," until he went down. Like it did make us talk about that. So, and he performed well. So yeah, out of the Bengals, I'm looking for him to return to form. That's the big thing to me, is after that injury and being sacked so many times, can he shake it off and get back to where he needs to this offseason and next season? Looking at their schedule, they got the sixth strongest schedule based on last year's standings. That's not great for them in that division too. So yeah, they're not going to end up being. They're not going to push for a playoff spot unless Burrow really takes a leap with Jamar Chase as well. There, his old buddy. I don't think so though. I agree with the defense points that you made. Overall, what I take away from the draft is they have a plan. It was it seemed like they had a plan with what they wanted to do. Whether you agreed with it or not is another story, but at least from that point, I'm like, all right, they're building around Burrow in this way. They still address the offensive tackle position, but they also spent a lot on defense. So it just made sense to me. I don't think they're going to be tremendous yet, but hey, as long as Burrow can get back to form, this team is going to be making strides this season and every season on, hopefully, right?
One thing I just want to comment real fast too about strength of schedule. I always find it so interesting, because like they're like, the Saints are projected to be as good as they are this year based on what they did last year, where Drew Brees was their quarterback, right? Drew Brees is no longer the Saints quarterback. So all of a sudden the Saints become presumably a much easier opponent, but that hasn't been factored in yet
for sure,
when you look at strength of schedule. So that's just one of the things that I always find so interesting, is because so many of these teams that we think are going to be great this year, like San Francisco last year, you thought would have been, a loss on your schedule. As soon as Kittle and Bosa and Garoppolo go down, all of a sudden that becomes a pretty easy W, right? So it's so interesting the way that these schedules shake up as the season goes on.
Oh yeah, you gotta take it with a grain of salt for sure. It's just funny that the Bucks still have one of the easiest schedules, but that's neither here nor there. And let's move on. Looking at our third team in the AFC North, we have the Baltimore Ravens, who I'm not as hot on them. Honestly, I don't hate what they did this offseason, but I'm not sure what it means. So, Drew, how did you view the offseason for the Ravens?
Yeah, I think it's a tough thing, right? And I was using Lamar Jackson when we were talking before off recording, thinking about Russell Westbrook, right? And
Yeah.
setting
Yeah.
the record for triple doubles. Russell Westbrook to me is a lot like Lamar Jackson, who I think can be absolutely dominant in the regular season, win the MVP, reset these records. But in the playoffs, is he the guy that I want to be able to lead my team to a victory when everything is on the line? And no, neither of those guys are the guys that I want. But looking at the regular season, I think Baltimore set up to have a great regular season overall. You do lose Orlando Brown, but you're able to take away from the Steelers Alejandro Villanueva, right? And he's definitely not as good, but I mentioned this when the Ravens first traded Orlando Brown. You have the most mobile quarterback possibly in NFL history. You need a left tackle, presumably least or less than every other team in the NFL. So, and then I think what we saw with the running game last year, how big of an impact losing Marshall Yanda was. So I think they're looking at this as we can kind of, spread out some of this talent. They bring in Sammy Watkins. They also draft Rashad Bateman, a receiver, in the first round. They gave Lamar a lot more talent around him from a receiver option, right? You already had Hollywood Brown there. They're giving Lamar every opportunity to be the guy, to be the passer, to be the quarterback of this team, to lead them to success. So I do really like that overall. I'm just not sure if he is that guy. I think they are going to dominate the regular season. I think Lamar's going to have an MVP caliber season statistically, but I don't know if that's going to translate into success once they get into the playoffs. Also, on the defensive side, I think this is where it concerns me a little bit. You did lose Ngakoue, who I don't think he's like, all that great, but losing Matt Judon, especially to a, rival in the Patriots, I think is a big loss. Overall, though, John Harbaugh has done a tremendous job with this team. Defensively last year, they were second in yards allowed per game. They have some solid options here. Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle at tight end, J.K. Dobbins as the running back. Vegas has their over-under at 10.5 for the year. They're a team that I basically see the same thing that has happened the past 2 seasons. I think they're going to roll through December and then hit some speed bumps once they get into some really competitive cold weather games.
Yeah, my question for this team is the offense. I don't know what it is when I have seen their games. Yeah, they did win, and I'm pretty sure they were 11-5, second in the division last season. But for some reason, I just don't view them as that much of a threat anymore. And I don't know why. Yeah, their defense was good last year. Their offense was not horrible last year. They still had a pretty good team overall. But I don't know if it's because of this division and the other moves the team's made. For some reason, I just don't think this team's that hot. I really don't have any reason to. I can't.
I don't understand.
I can't
because,
pinpoint.
That's what their roster's better this year.
Yeah, I can't pin. Well, that's the argument, right? Is it? I like bringing in. I mean, that's an opinion, right? Though, I like bringing in Watkins for that, and I just think maybe overall what I'm landing on is that this is the year Jackson has to prove that he can be the guy and win a game. Maybe that's where I'm standing. I'm just like, all right, cool. He's a quarterback. Like, I'm not one of the people saying he's a running back. No, he's a quarterback who's mobile. He's good, right? I like him as a player. Maybe it's just because of the Ravens' positions the last couple of years being overshadowed by multiple other teams, right? But to me, it may be just that. I think that's what my opinion is that this is a year that Baltimore needs to show that they can overcome something. I think maybe they had regular season, and maybe I'm echoing exactly what you said, and I just didn't realize what I was saying. Regular season, cool, you're good, but get there then. If they can't get there, I'm not into that anymore. Get to the playoffs, get a win, like show us something. I think they show us stuff, but they never actually they're always just short, and maybe that's not fair to put on the team. But overall, I think that's kind of where my opinion is on them. Is like, all right, cool, yeah. I mean, they're gonna be good, but does it mean anything? Does this actually make them better? I don't know. I'm a little off on them for some reason.
Yeah, well, and that's just what I'm kind of trying to key in on, because I'm not saying that they're going to win the Super Bowl. In fact, that was what I was trying to be very clear about. It's like I think they're probably still going to lose in the first or second round whenever they end up playing in the playoffs, right? But
Yeah.
do you not see them as a playoff team?
It, no, because I don't think Pittsburgh is as good as them, even though they had a better record. I think Pittsburgh's gonna slide. I don't know why I feel weird about them, and I can't pinpoint why, but I just feel off about this team, and I don't think it wouldn't surprise me if they're actually worse than last season. I don't know why. It's just a feeling. Overall, like I just aren't into what they're doing. There's
Yeah,
not a
I
lot of reasons behind it other than like I think what it is the fact that year after year after year they haven't done it, They haven't got there. They always been like just close, and there's so many questions about Lamar Jackson, and I think it's just purely like can he take over a game and do it? Cuz I don't think this team is going to.
but I think he's proven that he can do that in the regular season, right?
Yeah, so maybe it's only off season that or post off season. Yeah, can you? It's only the postseason that I'm talking about. It's just like yeah, this team will dominate, sure, but if they're not gonna get past and win some games that are like games that are tough, they lose the games that people expect them to, right? Win one of those games in the playoffs. I think mainly, I guess that's my focus. Is I want to see. I don't care what they do in the off season. Show me something more than what you've done so far in the playoffs, and then I think I'll be a little hot on them. But cool, you're going to be a good regular season team. Overall, yeah, they made decent moves, but that's how I feel about them.
Yeah, I think on paper they got much better, especially offensively. So I'm just not seeing what you are, which is fine. But I mean, I think that they're going to be able to run away with a lot of this regular season without checking out too much of their schedule. I just think that they are such a balanced team. They have such a deep roster, and maybe losing Orlando Brown is a much bigger deal than I'm making that out to be. Maybe
Yeah,
Matt
could be.
Judon really, hurts the defensive side. But I think that with the way that the game's moving, to bring in the offensive skilled position talent that they did, along with Villanueva and Zeitler, yeah, I'm hot on them as a regular season team, either coming in, first or second in the division and making the playoffs.
Yeah, and I will say to wrap them up and to move on to the next team, the Ravens have the second strength of schedule quote, which means nothing, but they do have the AFC West to go through as well, which is another tough division. So both of these divisions, West and North, are head to head, which I think will really define the playoff landscape. Is how
I think
those
you
two
and I
divisions.
might
Well, I
disagree
think
about how tough the AFC West is too.
Interesting.
Considering
Yeah,
you only had one playoff team and you had three teams with losing records, right? Or I guess the Raiders had a 500 record, or
yeah,
9-7, right?
yeah,
So
but they're tough. I mean, they beat both the Browns and I want to
sure.
say. Anyways, yeah, this is a separate.
Like with the AFC North, where you have like three playoff teams compared to one. That was it.
Yeah, no, that's a separate thing. Anyways, but moving on to our fourth and final team in the AFC North, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who is a team that I think they clearly overperformed last season. I think they went 11-0 for a little bit. That was just crazy. But then they really slid hard, and they still held on the first, but overall I wasn't that into. This is another team. If both Pittsburgh and Baltimore, I feel are gonna I think people have them as overperforming this year. I think they're overrated a little bit. Pittsburgh, I see taking an immense slide. I'm still surprised that Ben Roethlisberger is there. It makes sense for the season, but I definitely think he's out starting next season. That's kind of how I view them. I think they're trying to win now because they realize what's happening, and they're going to have to find a quarterback going forward. But Drew, how do you view this team, this offseason so far?
I think it was a bit of a rough offseason for them. I think that they're, similar to where I view Baltimore as, is that I think they're going to be a good regular season team, and they're limited once they get into the postseason, similar to what the Saints have been, right? With Drew Brees and just his ability to stay healthy and push the ball down the field. Yeah, I mean, if I was Big Ben, I would have retired. I think that he is shot, especially once you get past 8 games. Um, but I would also say there was nobody I don't think they would be able to get unless they go all in on like an Aaron Rodgers type that would
Oh
have
yeah.
given them a better shot to be competitive this season. I mean, what are you going to do? Bring in Andy Dalton or Tim Tebow, Blake Bortles. So like I'm okay with him running it back for this season. I did not love the draft pick of Najee Harris in the first round. I love Najee Harris. I think, and as a person, man, to do your draft night at the homeless shelter in San Francisco that you grew
Yeah.
up in, to give back the way he has already, he's a phenomenal person. I just don't like taking running backs in the first round, especially when you probably
No.
could have got somebody, of equal or, slightly lesser value in the second. They really have had big issues with their offensive line. Last year, they were not good, and they still lost Villanueva. You lost Matt Feller. You lose Marquise Pouncey. In rushing yards per game last year, they were 32nd out of 32 teams, right? They are not good running the ball at all. You also lose James Conner. So like, yeah, Najee Harris maybe helps that like a small degree, but if you can't block for him, what does that actually mean? Their defense is still insanely talented. You did lose a couple, like depth pieces there, but they still have their core defensive presence intact, and that might be able to carry them, a bit here. Defense last year was third in points allowed, and third in yards allowed per game, and third in passing yards allowed a game. So like they were able to like defend that very well. This is such a stacked division. Even though you have phenomenal receiver play here with Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster, I think that Roethlisberger, specifically with that offensive line, really limits you on how far you're going to be able to go. So Vegas has them at 8.5. I think that that's pretty fair. I do love Mike Tomlin, and I think that's the biggest thing
Yeah.
for this division as well, is that I think John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin have an edge just when it comes to coaching. Kevin Stefanski looks to be amazing, right? But with only seeing 1 year, I still need to see a little bit more. I've seen a lot of head coaches have success, in a one season. So I want to see more of that long term.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I was gonna say too. Like Mike Tomlin's still there, and he's still a pretty damn good coach, right? But overall, like yeah, they lost more than they gained tremendously. Like the thing that is gathering all this information for us only has one player edition, and they've lost like 9, 10. I'm not counting all of them, but they lost so many, and they didn't actually fill them in free agency. So yeah, you might have addressed it in the draft, but you lose James Conner, so then you take in your first round pick as a running back too. That doesn't make sense to me. It's like there's other players on the board that actually helped them with losing. I mean, Villanueva was after the draft, but they didn't have him. They didn't have Pouncey. They lost 3 of their offensive linemen who either starters or depth pieces, and they only drafted one or I guess they drafted a center and a tackle, but they're rookies. And are they actually going to be able to get you to improve in the running game after going 32nd? I don't know. I just don't think that they really did anything to make them better. They kind of it was almost like they were playing reaction instead of taking action on certain things. That's how I kind of view what they did this offseason. So yeah, they're going to be held back by Roethlisberger. It's almost like the Saints, but they're a little worse than the Saints in my opinion overall. But it's one of those things like, yeah, we'll see. They probably will be decent. They'll be competitive, but they only will go as far as Ben Roethlisberger will take them at this point, and I don't know how far that is. I'm not hopeful at all. So yeah, Vegas has them at 8. I wouldn't surprise if they're fighting for third place with the Bengals. That's kind of how I view this team right now. All right, we're now looking at the whole AFC North. Drew, let's give them some grades here. Out of the 4 teams at number 4, I'm gonna put the Bengals there just because I don't know what we're gonna get with Burrow and the offensive line and the defense. The defense is a huge red flag right now. It's just, is it gonna be able to stop some people? So I'll put them at 4. But again, to me, it would not surprise me if the Steelers dropped down there and the Bengals took a leap. It really depends on the play of both teams, but I think both teams are trending in those opposite directions, with Bengals getting a little better and Steelers dropping down a little. Overall, I'll still put Bengals 4 just because they have a lot of work to do, right? And Steelers have a better roster as of right
Yeah.
now.
I would agree that I think the Bengals got a little bit better, and I think the Pittsburgh got a little bit worse. But I don't think that there's an 8-game slide for those teams. So yeah, I mean, I think Cincinnati's 100% going to come in last place. I don't even think Zach Taylor is going to be the long-term answer at head coach there. So yeah, like I agree. I think Cincinnati will win a game or two more than what they won last year. I think that Pittsburgh will win, maybe even 3 or 4 games less than what they won last year. But yeah, I don't see an 8-game swing there. But I do think that Pittsburgh's defense is so good. I think that they are with the veteran leadership that they have. I think they can still get off to a hot start though. And I think that that's going to be the biggest thing for them. Is making sure that they can win the early games and making sure that they can win the games that they're supposed to win.
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, that's my 4 and 3, and I think it's the same for you, right?
Yeah.
All right. Let's look at number 2 then. I'm gonna put Baltimore here again. Sure, they might be number 1 in the division, but I don't see them. And I guess the Browns didn't really do much in the playoffs either. But to me, and it's not even so many people talk about the Ravens and say they are limited by Jackson. I don't necessarily think that, even though I'm kind of siding with that side saying that they're not going to overcome it. I think it's a team issue, right? I just don't know what this team is with Lamar Jackson. Is it going to be capable of getting to hub? Get in the playoffs. Show me that you can actually win games that you aren't supposed to win and win them well. But I'll have them at 2 overall. But again, I am not that hot on this team overall.
Yeah.
Still a good team, but
Yeah. Do you think that they're going to get a wild card spot though?
I think so. Yeah. Just
okay.
With I still think they are capable. It's just, and then that's why I'm landing on the fact that I think it's just, sure, regular season, great, you're awesome, you're a good solid team. I don't care though if you're not going to perform well in the playoffs at this point. Like that's kind of where I'm landing with this team as a whole, which isn't fair to review it in, but that's kind of where I'm landing on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make the case that Baltimore might be less likely to have success in the playoffs than Cleveland. Maybe. I think that's kind of like a 50-50 split. Like Baker hasn't shown me that he can be an effective quarterback in the playoffs either, right? So like I still have those same questions.
Yeah, but I think it's not about quarterbacks fully, and I know I keep saying Jackson, but and that's why I want to it's more of a team thing to me. That's kind of, it's just my impression of what I'm seeing, which again, there's not really stats to base this off of, except the fact that they haven't won the games that they aren't supposed to, like, and it's like, you're not going to win then, and you're not going to be successful if you can't win those games every now and then that you're not supposed to, and they haven't. So that's kind of where I land on them. And again, it's the quarterbacks haven't proven it yet, but it's the teams are trending in different directions. Same thing with Steelers and Bengals. I just think Baltimore's trending a little down, and so far Cleveland's trending up, in my opinion. I think they've got better this offseason.
Yeah, and I'm still not sure why you see Baltimore trending down though. Like I think that they definitely got better on paper this year. I'm really excited to see what Lamar Jackson does with 3 quality wide receivers for the first time in his career. I think that Baltimore is the fact that they're returning the vast majority of their defense, which is a good defense compared to Cleveland, which is returning like a brand new defense, not return, but I think Cleveland is going to get off to a slower start because of that, and that could effectively hurt them in the season overall. It is going to be interesting with the addition of the 17th game this year, because these two teams were tied with their records last year. So if that 17th game would have made a huge impact there, I do think that these teams are going to be 1-2. I think whichever team doesn't win the division is still going to be a playoff team via the wild card. In both of them, I would probably expect to, win maybe 1 game in the playoffs, but probably lose the second game. But yeah, I find your opinions on Baltimore just so curious, because I really view the team differently. I'm not expecting them to win the Super Bowl this year. I have major questions about Lamar Jackson's ability to get over the hump, the same way with, Michael Vick, right? The same way with Allen Iverson, like these phenomenal athletes that don't necessarily fit into systems tremendously well. But I think when you look up and down that roster, if I was a Baltimore Ravens fan, I would be much more excited going into this season about what the possibilities are ahead.
Yeah, man, I just don't. For some reason, I just don't think they're gonna. It could trend either way. They sure on paper they got better. I don't think it's gonna happen though. That's just what I'm calling right now for the Baltimore Ravens. They'll still make the playoffs, but I think they're gonna sneak in somehow. I think Cleveland's gonna take this division over. But that is gonna wrap up our AFC North in review, leading up to the NFL season. We'll be going over each and every division in the NFL, doing an offseason in review and predicting where they're going to land within the division leading up to the season start.